Good afternoon. Welcome once more to Made in MIQTV. It's 4 o'clock and it's Wednesday. And my guest this afternoon is Christopher Kurwie. Now I'm hoping he's going to join me. As I can see people starting to arrive. I'm hoping he's going to join me. We tried a different method when we tested this. Here he is. And he's going to invite himself in. Here we are. And all being well.
Excellent.
Smooth as anything. We're here. Brilliant. Hi, Chris. How are you?
Hi, Mark. I'm good. Nice to see
you. Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon to tell us the story of your life so far. And it's an interesting one. I can guarantee that. So quick bit of background. Correct me if anything I get wrong. Chris left Queggs in 2005, having done A-levels in maths and further maths. I'm going to say physics and chemistry, but I might get that wrong.
Biology, close. Biology, chemistry, and French.
Went to the University of Cambridge to study law. And then I'm going to let you take up the story from there. And we'll do it. I think it's fair to say that your career so far has had 3 distinct sections. Would that be right? So
yeah
we'll take them in turn and then sort of look back and forth at the whole thing. Would that be all right?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, maybe I'll just explain what those 3 chunks were.
Excellent. So you've gone to Cambridge to study law. What happened next?
Studied law, quite enjoyed it, and then ended up taking the sort of natural path from doing a law degree to becoming a lawyer. Did that in a firm in London for just over 3 years, and then left law for various reasons. Primarily, I wasn't loving it and didn't feel like it was a good fit to my skills and where I wanted to go. And actually ended up moving to Australia for the sort of the second chapter, which was working in a management consultancy firm out in Australia, a much smaller firm, which I loved and really thrived out there. And then the 3rd chapter was in 2016. I set up a business with best mate and also Old Sav, a guy called Abrar Gundru, who's a doctor. Set up a business called Messley that we've been running for 6 or 7 years since then, which is the 3rd chapter. So 3
Fabulous.
Yeah, 3 really different 3 really different things, all with pros and cons, which we can definitely get into.
Excellent. Right, that's a brilliant summary so far. So you discussed, when did you know you wanted to be a lawyer? Was that relatively late, or had you thought about that when you were quite young at school? What was the sort of...
Pretty late, to be honest. Yeah.
So, which was a bigger driver? I'm going to do law, or I'm going to go to Cambridge, or were both equally part of the equation? Would you say? Good
question. To be honest, I think I was probably more focused with trying to get into Cambridge.
Yeah.
And I remember actually Abra and I ended up having a very long conversation where we were just trying to figure out what we wanted to apply for, and neither of us had a really strong idea. I think we both settled on doing vocational degrees. He studied medicine and became a doctor. I studied law. I think we both felt that was maybe the more practical option. But also, to be honest, maybe looking back, wanting to do something that had sort of more status attached to it, and felt like something that would be well regarded by others, I suppose.
Yeah. And how much would I remember parents really fondly. I haven't seen them for a long time, but how much was parental influence have come into that, or not really? Is that something that was part of the equation, would you say, or not necessarily?
They were never kind of in your face telling me what they wanted me to be when I grow up, sort of thing. But I suppose you definitely want to do things that are going to lead to a career that's viewed as successful, I suppose.
Yeah. And I think that's something we have seen. Yes, definitely. Yeah. That I think parents invest a lot of money in education at Queggs. I think it's fair to say that they have to have an opinion and a view. I just wondered whether that was a factor. Say hello to your mum for me.
Yeah, definitely a factor. And I think the consequence for me of not having anything aged 17 or 18 that I was super passionate about was you pick a degree, I actually quite enjoyed the degree. You know, it's analytical law, and it's challenging, and surrounded by lots of smart people, which I really enjoyed. But then it puts you on this natural, it's almost like a conveyor belt. So these quite prestigious London firms come and they do these recruitment dinners. They're very good at wooing you with talk of London, New York, Hong Kong, fancy suits and, offices in the middle of London and all that stuff. And I ended up taking an offer from them in my second year. So still only really 19. You've only done a year and a bit of legal study. And you kind of committed your at least the beginning portion of your career to that path. And I don't really regret it. I think I learned a lot, and we talk about what it was like actually practicing as a lawyer. But it definitely, in hindsight, felt a bit odd to be making that commitment as a 19-year-old.
Yeah, but people do, don't they? I suppose there are other professions like that where medicine is another one. If you've gone and one day we'll get Abra on for part 2. I think.
Yeah. That would be nice. Yeah.
It reflects a different side of the story because you come together later. But you were at Cambridge together, albeit doing different courses. But I think medicine is that's a pathway as well. That is so. So you've got your law offer. You finish your law degree. Would there be, is that the path that people follow within Cambridge law? Well, in a law degree generally, they generally become lawyers, or do some people branch out and go, do you know what, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to go and do something else? Or is it fairly set in your experience?
It's pretty, from my cohort and people I knew, pretty much everybody either became a solicitor or a barrister, the two main legal routes. Solicitor with a firm, most people went down to London, or going to the bar, as they call it, and trained to become a barrister.
We had a barrister on a few weeks ago. Harry was on explaining about that. So which route did you follow?
So I went down the solicitor route. So I ended up, you do a 2-year training program where you rotate around different parts of the firm. So I ended up specializing in the corporate law, mainly doing mergers and acquisitions. Which is all super sexy and sounds amazing. And, it's some $1 billion companies buying some other $1 billion company. And you feel, and it's, it's often in the big firms, what you're doing is often front page news of the Financial Times and stuff. So on paper, it's, well, not really. You're just one tiny little
part of a team.
Yeah, part of a very big team. And I think what I found was that my natural inclination was to be quite interested in what was happening in the industry. Why is this company buying this other company? What's happening to them, and why is it? Why are we in this situation, and what's going on? And obviously, as a lawyer, it's not that sort of broad perspective. It's very specific and very narrow. And for me, the tipping point was we had a client that was a famous pizza chain. It's really interesting, the world of what people are doing when they dine out is changing, and consumer preferences are changing and stuff. But my job was to review all the contracts for mozzarella cheese, flour, and you imagine, it's a household name chain. They buy tons of flour a day, and really quite detailed. My attention to detail, I wouldn't say is my strength. I found that, to be honest, what I was doing was quite disconnected from the academic law that I studied. And after 3 years and what I felt like was giving it a good stint, I kind of realized, with a bit of a push from my partner, realized that this wasn't really something that I wanted to do for 20, 30, 40-year career or whatever.
And that's quite brave. I think that's quite brave to start to say, I'm going to look at something else when you've gone down a pathway, you've got this great job on the face of it, job lots of people would be pleased and proud to have, and you will have been as well. But that's quite a brave thing to say, maybe this isn't it. So what did you start to think then? What was the sort of, you mentioned your partner talked about looking at something else. How did that come about then? How did you end up in Australia and in Korea?
Well, it took me about a year to commit to moving. The big thing actually that I noticed that was really the tipping point for me was I noticed that my peers were starting to develop and move ahead of me in terms of how good they were as lawyers, because they were just much more passionate about it. They'd go to all the training, read up on, and I just wasn't really interested in that, and thought, hang on, if this trend continues for 20 years, I'm going to be bottom of the class here. And so,
not a nice feeling to be
no,
looking for.
why would you pursue that? So, Australia was a coincidence, but we wanted to move abroad. We've both lived in London for quite a while, and thought we wanted to pursue something overseas. And then I had a contact, a friend of a friend that ran a consulting firm out there. And so, the two things came together, and in very late 2012, we moved out to Australia.
Very good. So in Sydney, I think you said, was that you went to Sydney? Yeah. And
Yeah,
so
that's right.
for those who don't know, what do consulting firms do? What sort of things day to day were you doing? And was your law experience relevant, or did you have to start again, or how did that work for you?
Good question. So management consulting firms, which is quite a broad umbrella term, to be honest, for lots of different things, but typically you're called in by a company for a project, which might last 4 to 8 weeks, maybe, that will be to look at something within their business that they don't have a handle on, and they need to call in somebody or a team of people who are experts in that industry to have a look at. So it might be that they want to consider reviewing the pricing that they charge for their products, or they might want to consider launching in another country, or do a review of their team and whether they have the right team in place, whether they should expand or contract their team. Those sorts of kind of quite broad questions.
Yeah.
And it tends to combine, to call them law, more numbers based.
Hi. Sorry, I lost you for a moment there.
Sorry.
I think it was a bit, we froze a little bit. I think we're back. Hello? Oh, got one. We're just freezing up a little bit, I think. Yeah, I think we're both cutting out. Yeah, we'll keep going. Sorry, you were saying you go into companies and try and solve a problem, but perhaps the company hasn't got the expertise in-house to look at a different aspect or a review. So you haven't got previously any experience of that, so you're gaining experience as you go.
Quite a fast learning curve. Obviously, you're being brought in supposedly as an expert, but I came in at quite a junior level, which was one of the things I think that made the career quite challenging. You're going to stepping down in seniority. So that was a bit challenging, tutoring and mentoring, which really helped.
Yeah. We are still having one or two. Out. It's still a bit sticky. I think both ends actually, or we're probably both experiencing. I'm not sure whether it's we haven't paid our internet bill or you haven't. But anyway, we'll persevere. It sounds fine. The sound's fine. I think the picture's just a bit sticky.
Okay.
So again, steep learning curve. You're in Australia working with international firms or Australian firms or a mixture. What's the sort of nature of the work?
Yeah,
quite varied, I guess.
Yeah, mixture, quite varied. You asked, whether the legal stuff was helpful. I definitely think it was. The broader, professional services skills of, and general skill, being organised and, being prioritizing your time and all those sorts of quite generic skills. But consultants, anyone watching that's looked into consulting as a career will know you spend all your time in spreadsheets trying to figure stuff out, and lawyers don't do that ever really. The only spreadsheet knowledge I had was probably making a shopping list. So it was quite a stark transition, and obviously moving across the world. Australia is an easy place to move to. Obviously, there's no language barrier. Our cultures are pretty similar. But it's still a big change, still a long way from home and family and stuff. So, it's quite a big change.
Yeah, but you clearly learned a lot. And you mentioned the legal experience, but also you'd worked in mergers and acquisitions, so you know something about how companies work, and so you're in Australia for 4 years then, if my sums are correct. Yeah.
Yeah, four and
So
a half. Yeah, yeah.
so what sort of things started to make you think, oh, it's time to go home, or we've had enough of Australia, or what were the drivers there?
No, well, it's quite the opposite actually. We were really happy in Australia, and we would, to
That's
be honest, we would have stayed out there longer term. The lifestyle is really good, and I really urge anyone, if their career and their circumstances allow them, to try and get a stint working overseas.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's just yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, even if the Aussie culture is not vastly different to ours, it's still different
Yeah.
circumstance and different context. So we were quite happy there. But what happened was Abra, who I mentioned before, and I started chatting about different business ideas. He was working in the hospital and observing a bunch of things that he felt could and maybe should be done differently, particularly around the way that doctors were supported through their careers and the way that they found work. And I'd observed some of those problems being quite elegantly solved in other industries through the work that I was
Mm.
doing and some of the clients that I had. And so it felt like perhaps bringing those two things together would have been an opportunity. And that's where the planning process started for what became the third chapter and us starting our business together.
Yeah, we're freezing up again a little bit. Are you back? Ooh, lost you there a little bit, I think, a bit, Chris. I don't know if you can hear me. Mm.
I'm not sure I can hear you. I can hear you, yeah.
Yeah, it's gone very sticky, very, very sort of glitchy. Let me try to just see if that speeds it up. I don't know. Um, can you hear me again? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah, I can. Sorry about this. Yeah, it's coming in
That's
now.
okay. I think we've got a slight delay now as well, just to make it a bit more of a challenge. So we'll keep talking. So the you're talking about this idea. So lots of us have lots of ideas when we're chatting with mates. But to make it a reality is quite a big deal. It's quite a big challenge. So what were the sort of at what point did you move from just talking around something that may happen to actually this could be a real thing? What sort of timescale and how did that come about?
Yeah, we did a lot of what you mentioned of just chatting about it, and every time we spoke, we'd kind of kick some ideas around and then not do anything about it for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So there was definitely an extended period of, yeah, more than a year, I'd say, when we were doing that.
Hmm.
But we both had itchy feet. Abra had his own story of where he felt like his medical career was going, and um, yeah, I mean, to be honest, I came into contact with a lot of really impressive entrepreneurs when I was
Hmm.
clients or people that I was dealing with. Like, it was super fun, taking a risk, going out on your own, not in, maybe and then really what happened, but actually being the one, in charge. So yeah, slowly, bit by bit, we started to put the pieces together.
Uh-huh. Well, we lost some of that, but we're so what when you're putting the piece together, what does that look like? So how do you start a business when one of you lives in Australia and one of you lives in the UK, and what
Mm,
what are the first steps?
yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's really
'Cause this is
yeah. Um, Yeah, that's really difficult, I think. And I know a lot of people really capable people who've had great ideas but have never taken them anywhere. And that was me. I had a bunch of ideas that never went anywhere. It's a really crushing feeling when you see 3 years later you walk past a billboard and you're like, I had that idea. But people say ideas are worthless. It's all about getting out and doing it, and your idea itself is nothing until you do something about it. Um, and so we um, I think the most important thing to answer the question is to try as quickly as possible to get some external proof or validation that the idea you have is in some way worthwhile.
Mhm.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Am I freezing for you? I think we can still hear you. Apologies to you, Chris. We are frozen up, I think. I don't know if you can hear me now. What we may, I don't know if you can hear this. It may be worth disconnecting and reconnecting. I've got part 1 and part 2, but this just, it's pretty much frozen now. Apologies everyone who's watching. This is not the norm, and we've lost him. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill a little bit. This is the first time this has happened, so apologies, and stay with us. We'll see if I can re-invite Chris to join. We seem to have just lost our connection one way or the other. He's back. Excellent.
I'm back.
Hello.
Not sure what happened. I got kicked out.
Yeah, it froze for a little while and then
Really?
go out. This looks much better. This seems to be a good.
Yeah, I'm not sure what. I'm in my office. We've got usually.
Yeah, there might have just been a bit of an internet waiver.
Yeah. Okay.
But we seem to be good. So excellent. So we were saying. I think the last thing we probably got clearly was you have a bunch of ideas. Some of them come to, well, you see, like you said, an idea is not worth anything until you do something about it.
Yeah.
And then you want to try and seek some validation that, is this idea going to go anywhere? Is there a place for it? So how did you go about doing that? Who do you ask?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we had various ideas around things that doctors would find useful in their career planning process. And also things that hospitals would find useful in terms of organising their staff and finding people usually at short notice for vacancies. And so on both sides, we try to put together, what people call a minimum viable product, which is a fancy way of saying a quick first version of the thing that you aim to build. And being really strict with yourself on doing that as quickly and as cheaply as possible. I think a lot of people go off for 12 months and try and build something without actually getting any feedback from customers or potential customers as to whether it might be useful to them. And so for us, we hacked something together pretty basic. If you look back now, you might cringe at how it looked and how limited it was, but it's not supposed to be the final thing. It's supposed to just be, your MVP, as they say. And we had to figure a bunch of stuff out. How do you buy a website domain? Neither of us have done that before, and sort out your hosting and all of those bits and bobs.
So initially, this is a website. You're setting up a website to manage what doctors are looking for in terms of work and what hospitals are trying to get in terms of getting doctors into hospitals.
Yeah.
And then presumably you've got things like how do you let people know this is even going on?
And you have to figure this. I mean, this is the great thing I think about for people that are thinking about starting a business. It's like you got to figure this all out for yourself. And you've got to figure out all the technology stuff that you've probably never done before. You need to become try and become an overnight expert in marketing, customer service, operations, all this stuff. But I enjoy that breadth. And I enjoy figuring stuff out for myself. Like you might remember, I was always could be a slightly reluctant learner when when I couldn't go and learn stuff for myself. But I love going and figuring things out. Yeah,
and the law experience there, where you've got to go and do your research, you've got to go and find out what the facts are. That presumably is something that's now potentially relevant in the next phase of what you're trying to do. And
potentially not as directly, but it all builds on top of its experiences that are building on the past in one way or another,
and relating to other people in and around in professional life and seeking their expertise. So you've got you get a website up and running. You said before, I think, doing it as cheaply as possible, because you don't want to sink all your life savings into this without some sort of return, presumably. So what's the next phase of, you've got something that you think is workable. What did you guys do next?
So I just take a step back and explain what we were trying to solve. So Abra realized as a doctor that there's very little to support doctors when they were making quite important career decisions around which specialty of doctor they would want to focus on. Obviously, there's a big difference between being a surgeon or a GP or a cardiologist, to take three examples. There's also very little information about what it's like to work in different hospitals, different parts of the country, all things that probably the NHS should support their staff with, but for various reasons don't. And so that was our focus initially, was providing a set of tools and resources to help those doctors. So yeah, we got some data that we could find online. We built a website where you could log in and leave reviews and read reviews. We were really active on social media, posting in a bunch of different groups and building up our own page. And really just trying to hustle as much as we could and just get as much stuff out there and try and make it so that people could hear about us.
Are you doing this at the moment while you're still working as a management consultant, or have you finished doing that?
No, this was all moonlighting, so weekends and evenings. The time difference actually ended up, funnily enough, working quite well, because I would finish work in the evening and then that would be daytime in the UK. Abrar was working, he trains as an anaesthetist, so he was working full time, on a doctor's rota, which is not very forgiving. But to be honest, looking back, that was probably the make or break moment, because you're both pretty busy. It's hard to find the energy in the evening to get up and do this stuff. And, a lot of the stuff you're doing, well, even now, but still in the early days, they're experiments. You think something might work, but there's a fair chance it won't.
Yeah.
And I think the best entrepreneurs have got that experimentation, scientists mindset of we'll have a hypothesis which we'll test and quite quickly try and get some feedback on. So yeah, you're staying up late when you're tired, working on something, and half the time it doesn't work. And that's really difficult. I think, to be honest, what propelled us forward was probably more Abrar than me, like living in that environment. Like he acutely felt the problem himself and was very kind of, and was very attuned to the value of solving the problem and quite focused on that kind of more broader ambition.
And was that, that's obviously one of the key things there. He's experienced this frustration, so he's lived it, and is around other people that are doing that. So were you able to get quite a lot of feedback from him involving others that he knew? Is that something that happened, or? Yeah,
a lot. Yeah, and that was actually really helpful. It's difficult to get good quality feedback from people. Mates will tell you it's great, but actually, you need. Yeah. You need something more objective than that. So we'd take a prototype. And he'd take it into the hospital and show people in the doctor's mess. What do you think about this? Do you prefer it this way or that way? Pretty informal, but still really useful. He'd be chatting to other doctors. Again, just quite informally getting ideas for new things that we could build. So it really helps if you're trying to start a business. I'd say in an area where you don't have personal experience, it really helps to find someone to pair up with. They'll just understand the problem far more intimately than you could, being an external.
Okay, so we're at what point did you think we've got something here? This is worth quitting my job for, I suppose.
Yeah,
that's a big step.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and especially having done a career switch already. It's like it's a bit like snakes and ladders where you go back to the beginning. There's only so many times you can go back to the beginning. We did a thing called an incubator program, which is kind of like a boot camp where you come. They bring a bunch, in our case, about a dozen companies together, and you work for about 6 weeks quite intensively together in an office that they give you. The idea is by the end of that, you've got a whole bunch more progress on your business. Ideally, you've hit some impressive metrics of some kind, and then at the end they introduce you to potential investors where you might go and raise some money and take the business to the next stage. We did that whilst I was still working, so I took unpaid leave. Did that program, and then ended up raising some money off the back of it, which we'll talk about in a sec. And that was really the trigger then for saying, okay, there's enough proof here that this could be a good third chapter. And so that was early 2017. raised our first round of funding and left sunny Australia and came back to Blighty.
Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned about the funding. So how did that all work? Dragon's Den kind of thing springs to mind, but what was it like?
Yes, similar to that, one-on-one rather than a sort of panel usually. Although sometimes investors will get together and you pitch them as a group. But yes, it's similar idea to Dragon's Den. They want to know who you are, what's your background, what problem you're solving, and what evidence you have at that stage that shows that you might be a good team to go and solve that problem. So we got asked lots of questions that you'll hear on Dragon's Den, like, what's your product? How does it work? How are you going to make money? How many users have you got? Or how much money have you made so far?
Yeah.
What other people are doing something similar and why are you better than them? Which is, they're all difficult questions because it's obviously new. And I think some investors think you should have it all figured out at the start, which you obviously don't. The other reality is, people say raising money is, a bit like dating. There's more no's than yeses.
Yeah.
So, it can be quite a difficult process because, more people will say no than say yes. But, I think the thing that helped us stand out, to be honest, in hindsight was, Abra's a very impressive guy and has a lot of experience in the industry. I think that that really came across, that we had quite an intimate understanding of the problem that we were trying to solve.
We're solving a real problem here. We haven't invented this.
I think, to be honest, a lot of smart people do almost invent a problem to go and solve, and they actually, people talk about falling in love with a solution, whereas actually it's the problem you need to fall in love with. And I think and I think it came across that we were quite passionate about making a change in doctors' lives, and our brother's own personal story there. They also liked, I think, the fact that we'd known each other since the final year of junior school. We both joined the junior school in the final year of junior school in year 6.
Brilliant.
So, we'd known each other at that point for, more than a decade, 15 years or more, or more than that, almost 20 years. So that, a lot of young businesses break up because the founders fall out and realize they don't actually get on very well with each other.
Yeah, which wasn't the case, and also, the flip side's true. You can be friends for a long time, but then this puts a different strain on your relationship if you're working more closely. But obviously, that's not been the case for you guys. So so you've got some funding, and that allows you to develop further. Was there anybody else at that time doing something similar, or had you found a unique solution? What was
I think we're in a bit of a niche. I think there weren't too many people looking at that problem, which was obviously helpful. And the funding really helped us kick off, because obviously up to that point we were just running off our own savings. We hadn't spent very much money at all. Maybe something in the order of £10,000 in total. So we'd done it quite thriftily. But the point at which we had some funding, we went and got an office, got a team. Hired a bunch of people and really tried to, put this idea in motion, which we did. Next part of the story, we raised a second round of funding because things looked like they were going really well. We grew the team pretty significantly to being, more than 15, I think, at its peak, and then had a realization that actually the business needed to change direction slightly. We were quite focused on this idea of building this network or community for doctors based around sharing information, which was proving useful, and we were getting a huge number of doctors registering with us. There wasn't an obvious way of making money from that, and a way to sort of take it to the next level. We realized that actually what the majority of these people were coming to us for was actually help finding work. And the reviews and stuff were useful, but actually really what they wanted was someone who's going to make it really easy to find a new job and to move from one hospital to another, or from medicine to something different, or to move abroad, or that kind of thing. And so we changed the focus of the business to continue doing what we were doing, but maybe to add another layer on top, which we really focus on now, which is helping doctors find work, and to make that as easy and fast and smooth and convenient as possible for them. and yeah, that's been our focus now for the last 3 or 4 years.
And were there any effects through the pandemic? Because obviously you're in an industry that was, well, you supporting an industry that was severely affected, as many industries were. Everything changed. So what were the sort of reflections on what did COVID mean for you guys?
We were lucky, I think, in that hospitals were kind of still open, obviously,
Yeah,
and actually the opposite.
indeed.
Demand for
Yeah.
hospital staff obviously went up. I got a friend of mine that runs a similar business in the hospitality space. Helping
Mm.
wait staff and kitchen staff find work, and obviously that business actually shut down because it
Yeah.
just obviously went to nothing for a year or so.
Hmm.
The big change for us was we used to have an office in London, and everybody would come to the office every day like everyone else. And we transitioned to being a remote-based business at that point, which we've kept up now. So everybody works from home. And we get together as a team monthly, but fundamentally everybody works from home, which, to be honest, wouldn't have happened without the pandemic. I think we would have all thought that coming into the office every day was normal, just as we did think for the previous however many years.
Absolutely. And I think in many sectors, isn't it, that we've discovered that this can work a different way than we thought, and traveling the world for having meetings. We don't need to always do that. It's good to meet in person, but you don't always have to do that. And I think there's been quite a lot of shifts in lots of areas, which is interesting. And that's interesting. That you don't need an office. You can manage your business from different points in the world.
Yeah.
And
So we have a place in London that we rent out flexibly when we need it. We pay by the day or by the hour, even to have a meeting point. But no, we don't have any ongoing costs on rent. It also means we can hire people from all over the world.
I was just going to say, where are your team? Are they all over? Are they really?
Yeah,
really...
all over. Mostly UK based. I actually moved down to Cornwall during the pandemic and have sort of settled down here. Some of the team is still in London, but we've got people all over the UK, a couple in Manchester, people in Brits, expats abroad. One lives in Spain, and then we've hired people in Eastern Europe and so on.
Right.
It's great. I mean, it really breaks down boundaries.
And again, when you started this, that probably wasn't anywhere on your radar. That's where this is going to go, because that wasn't how it was done back then, I suppose.
Yeah, and we were very focused on, you get a bunch of applicants for a job and everyone had to live within half an hour of the office, and we routinely reject people that looked great. But, if you lived in Leeds and our office was in London, then how is that going to work? It's just not, not viable. So yeah, that was probably the biggest kind of impact for us as a business. I suppose lucky in hindsight that, being in healthcare, we weren't really impacted directly by the pandemic. And actually, you could argue that it was actually a bit of a help for us, because a lot of doctors after that period of obviously very intense work for them started to stop and take stock on what they wanted to do with their careers and whether they wanted to make a change. And I think we've done well by positioning ourselves as someone that can help them if they want to start looking for work or move from one job to another. They can use our service to find work quite easily.
To look at and register with that, and you've grown presumably in size. You've got lots and lots of doctors, more and more hospitals. Has that been the case, that word's got out and this is a good thing, and that's helped you?
Yeah, definitely. I think everyone thinks when you start a business that you're going to have this kind of explosive growth. I remember doing the business plan when we were raising money that says, we'll have gazillions of dollars in the bank by now. And the reality is different. But what I've noticed is when you find something that works, the compounding of that success over time is really, really powerful. And if you're patient with it, we're now at a point where, the growth is coming really quickly after a period of figuring out what works and experimenting that can last quite a while. We've managed to grow the team. I think we're now known as, we're very well known amongst doctors, and I think anyone that is considering looking for work would probably almost certainly use us, at least maybe amongst a few other options. But Yeah,
it's one of the people that do
that's good, and we're very
brilliant.
focused on, because of Abra's background, we've tried to infuse the whole team with a real sense of purpose.
Hmm.
Um, and doctors don't, I don't think they get paid enough, and they don't get particularly well looked after by the NHS. They don't usually have someone on their side advocating for them and helping them. And so we think we can fill that role and empower them and support them. And I think they really appreciate it that we have
That
that stance.
and that brings us up to date. So pretty much, what's
Yeah.
next then? Do you think? Another is there another career change in the future? Who can say? Maybe, and you're not scared of that because and neither should anybody be, because you bring your experience and your passion and try the next thing. But
Yeah.
what do you think is next for you and for Abra? I suppose is continue to grow.
Good question. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of legs left in the business.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is when you raise investment from people, they only get their money back if you sell the business to someone else. Exit the business, as it's called. So that's definitely on the horizon at some point.
It's an option.
Yeah, and we're in no rush, but I think if the right thing came along, we'd be open to it if we thought that the person that bought it was going to be a good steward for the business and would keep on doing what we've been doing. And should that happen, who knows? Then I guess there'll be a chapter 4, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd love to do something with Abra again. I think we make a good team. But who knows? Maybe go back to Australia. That would be cool. We got our passports when we were out there, so the whole family can technically Australian now, so we could move back there quite easily, which is cool.
Yeah. So you got some freedom there as well.
And I love learning new things, so I'd love the idea of picking up something new. Being a student of something again.
There's always more to learn. As we say in school, there's always more things to learn. It's and that's brilliant to hear you say that. Despite all these achievements, all these things, it's what having that thirst, almost that willingness to keep an open mind.
I think when we spoke a couple of days ago, doing our technology test, that was obviously time very well spent. One of the things we spoke about then was, I think, looking back and having changed paths a few times, is just trying to give people that are at the beginning of that journey the confidence to recognize that no one's career is a straight line. And I think you look at someone's LinkedIn profile and it does look like a straight line. That's often concealing various mishaps along the way.
Indeed.
That get scrubbed out in hindsight. And actually, picking a path, it's probably not as big a decision as it feels like at the time. And I know people say follow your passion, but what does that mean? I didn't have a passion at 17, and that's why I ended up, I think, taking the safe option, perhaps, of going down the legal path. But yeah, certainly not thinking like the choice that you make as a sixth former is going to lock you into 40 or whatever it is, 50 years of kind of labor in one industry, no matter how good or bad it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's hugely important for people to hear, because I think maybe more so than it ever was. But you found, I would say, from hearing you talk, you found a passion, but a bit later on. You don't have to find it right away. You might take time to explore different ideas and to learn different things that bring you to something that perhaps you weren't almost definitely weren't expecting. I don't think we'd have necessarily sat in our further maths class in 2005 and talked about being entrepreneurs. That's probably not a future we could have guessed at, but clearly it's a successful one that's come, and that's absolutely fantastic.
I don't think I would have taken those decisions as well without having had the experience that I had, if that makes sense. So it would be great to go and start a business age 21, straight out of uni, and make it successful immediately. That's what you'd write on your on your plan or whatever, if you have one. But I don't think that's realistic. Age 21, I would have had no idea what I was doing. Wouldn't have been able to handle the stress and the challenge of it, and all the that only came from the decade or so of previous work. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, the right thing at the right time is how it's out. I say this every week, but it's even more true. 45 minutes has absolutely flown by. I know we had a little bump in the middle. If we could look back very briefly to any memories you've got of school to reminisce, because obviously, you know, that was not just your connection to me, but also to Abra and to me. We had it. You were here from the junior section, from the junior school. What have you got? Particular strong memories, particularly fond things, or funny things? Anything what jumps out at you when you think back to school days?
Yeah, a lot of my memories are obviously the people, but sport mainly. Like I loved all that. I was hockey and cricket were my sports.
Just how I remember you as a hockey player for sure.
Yeah, and I only found hockey quite late. I was a sort of below average rugby player at 5'9" and about 8 stone, I think, at the time. And then found hockey, or actually being 5'8" is an advantage.
Close to the boy.
Yeah, and loved that, and that was a lot of my social circle, and loved it. And then went to uni and I didn't carry on playing cricket, but played hockey at uni. And that was my big, because I think it's a big place, going to these big universities, you kind of need, at least at the beginning, something to kind of anchor yourself to.
Yeah.
Sport was that. That's why I got, my initial friendship groups came through that. Playing cricket at the up at the field, and having a few beers in the sixth form afterwards with the teachers, and we used to have barbecues after games, if you still do that. But summer evenings, those were really good times.
Good times. You've got strong memories of them. And teachers that you want to give a shout out to, that obviously me.
Obviously.
Anyone else, you've got fond memories, or gratitude for particular moments, or anything you want to mention particularly?
Yeah, there's a few, and the ones that stand out. I was quite close to Jeff Tingle, Mr. Tingle.
Yeah,
he's my biology teacher, and he helped me a lot with various things. Mr. Howe in the languages department helped me with. I did my French. I used to live in France when I was much younger. He helped me with doing my French A level in a quite unusual way. And then on the sports side, Mr. Barker, who I know is just retired, was gracious enough to let me date his daughter for 2 years in the sixth form.
Lovely.
Owen Leask was my
your mentor.
Hockey guy. Yeah, and I know he's still with the school.
Yeah,
he still looks about 15.
He said best. He still looks ridiculously young and youthful and fit. I was talking to him yesterday, actually, because I started talking to him. He sends his best. He's got fond memories of you as well. So
fantastic.
Nice to hear.
Yeah,
Chris, I better let you get on with running this very successful business. I think we've now record as the longest one. So
excellent.
You've got that. And
that was my aim.
People with us, so people aren't signing out. So thank you for joining us, but really, thank you for coming on and sharing a fascinating story, well, 3 stories in one, really, and we look forward to hearing the next chapter. And when you speak to Abra, tell him I definitely want him to come on at some point and continue the story and tell us his side of events. But thank you again.
My pleasure.
Would you be up for if there are boys or girls indeed with questions about being an entrepreneur, or questions just generally about some of the things we talked about?
For sure.
Get in touch via channels, via LinkedIn and so on, or on Insta, because they can see you use. Is that okay?
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's been genuinely fascinating, genuinely interesting, and actually a delight for me to catch up with another.
Nice to reconnect.
Who's doing superb things. I mean, I'd really love doing this, because it's hearing the stories is the genuine pleasure of finding out what everyone's up to, but also it's really instructive to see the lessons that people have learned on the way and the advice they've got. So you obviously live down in Cornwall, you said, so I don't know when you're next back in Yorkshire, but if you ever find yourself up this way, please do come into school.
Have to make a trip.
Take your lunch and have a catch up, and you can go and have a look around the old classrooms and see what's what.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Bring your children by all means. But thank you so much for joining us. Really, really grateful, and all the best with it. Keep in touch and let us know how it's going.
Speak soon. I won't wait 20 years this time.
Please don't. That'd be great. Take care of yourself. Bye bye.
Cheers.
Thank you.